I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
From the gates of Mount Rome to the far corners of the endless highway, wherever you are, welcome to the show.
So you believe in some kind of Armageddon?
Yeah, most definitely. We in the last times and days right now. The Illuminati's in effect.
My guest today has his master's degrees in ancient and Near East studies. He publishes the website mysteriousworld.com. He is the author of several books, including Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man, and The End of the Age. Doug Elwell, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tim.
Thanks. I see also that you did a book on mysterious Ireland here.
That's right.
And like I was just telling you before we hit record, I could tell we kind of go a lot of different places today because you're well researched. And you said something about giants, so I'll just kick us off with something to do with giants. Did you ever look at? Because I could tell you've looked at many ancient sites. Did you ever look at Baalbek, Lebanon, specifically the Trilithon? Because it's got. I'll just explain it real quick for people, and I'm gonna let you go. There's a base or foundation or a platform there that is megalithic that other cultures kind of built on top of later, like Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, stuff like that. But the local legend there is that the foundation was built before the flood by Cain himself in a fit of raving madness. So I don't know if giants were involved. I'll let you tell me. I just think that that's an interesting site.
Okay. Well, there's the geological or the archaeological aspect of it. Is that it's Neolithic. I think the base of it is Neolithic, but the later buildings are Roman, I think. And so you have smaller blocks and gigantic blocks. And so they think it's very, very ancient from the Neolithic period, which I think was a few thousand years before Rome. I'm not sure the exact timing, but it's a very different construction. It's the sort of thing you see in South America with those large blocks there. The Great Pyramid has huge blocks. Also, the Sphinx, the Sphinx Temple, also huge. That's the Osirian, I think it's called. A number of different things around the world. Fit of madness for Cain is interesting because it might have been that he'd been somehow possessed and given knowledge of how to use some of the technological tools that had been given by his father Satan to create these things.
See, I thought that too. I had that thought because it kind of reminded me of when the Watchers struck Nebuchadnezzar with madness. Sort of a similar kind of a thing. And I remember the giant connection here now. Just the fact that Baalbek is like a Canaanite Phoenician city. I thought, man, there's got to be some giants involved there.
The Canaanites and Phoenicians are the most wicked peoples of that time. The Canaanites, they had been apparently, if we're to take the text literally, intermarrying with fallen angels and creating giants. And so what's called the iniquity of the Amorites. And the Amorites were a people who invaded from the north and took over Babylon and formed the dynasty of Babylon. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar was an Amorite king, I believe. And so they basically kind of ruled over that region and corrupted the Canaanites into their service by using various basically con artist type schemes that we would call it now, to rip them off and steal all their property and all their money and other things. The legislation, Mosaic legislation in the Bible, specifically forbids lending money for that purpose because they used money lending as a means to enslave people and steal from them. And so that's why they had a Jubilee cycle every 7 years and every 49 years of all of the land would return back to the original owners, because the Canaanites and people like them, the Amorites, would steal it from them using various scams. And so it was automatically designed to return the land to the original owners every 7 years to make sure that the Canaanites could not take over again and drive the Israelites out of the land.
Yeah.
So that I wanted to make that point. I wrote that as part of my thesis. The economic and other legislation in the Old Testament was designed specifically to combat the Canaanite tendency to enslave and destroy people and steal from them. And so they were one huge race of con artists who just rip people off left and right. And so,
Yeah.
I
I even saw later in history, so you've got the driving out of some of those tribes by Caleb and Joshua. And then after that, when the Romans are on the scene, the Romans were driving them out as well. Some of the Roman historical books that I've read suggested that the Romans didn't want anything to do with the Canaanites, whereas with many of the other cultures, they would integrate with them or allow them to integrate into the empire, however you want to look at it. They were like, no, the Canaanites are too foul. And I think it's something to do with that Nephilim belief system.
Right. Well, they were taught by the fallen angels to behave badly. And so they were engaged in all kinds of wicked practices from top to bottom, and they were completely wicked. And the reason they had to be got rid of was because they could not be fixed. They were just so bad that they got rid of them. So what's interesting is that later in the Old Testament, I forget, somebody asked God, why did you let the Canaanites continue in the land? And the reason was to make it so that you are constantly challenged by them. So having that challenge means that you're strengthened by that challenge. Otherwise, you would be weaker, and he wants you to understand not only how to deal with people like the Canaanites, but to understand why I wrote the Mosaic Law the way I did. It's because to make sure you don't fall into the same trap the Canaanites did and turn into these horrible people that are disliked and disrespected by everyone.
What about the going back to a point you made there? I've got to go back to this because it really stuck out to me. You're saying that Cain. It was interesting to you that Cain had this fit of madness, and you're wondering if it was maybe he somehow. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't remember how you said it, but was he getting technology from one of the fallen angels or Satan himself, you think?
One of the theories I have is that Satan actually, there was before the Earth was created as in our current form, and this gets into the Planet X theory. There was a planet that had formed naturally over time, like all planets do, using accretion over time. You might be familiar with the nebular hypothesis, where all planets are formed out of a nebula, and the parts of the nebula, gas and dust in there, attracts itself to each other collectively and forms a star through collective gravity. We know this is true because we can see stars in formation in other parts of our galaxy, so it's been proven. So I'm also, even though I believe in the Bible, I also believe real science is provable. And so over time, the planets gradually formed out of this nebular disk that formed as the sun formed. It spun out a huge amount of cloud of gas and dust that went for many light years, or for many millions of miles, like hundreds of millions, I think. And over time, planets formed out of that, and the planets did not form in their current order. It was originally Mercury, Venus, Mars, Earth, Jupiter. Earth originally was the fourth planet, but Planet X came through, an intruding planet, possibly when the solar system was forming in the nebula, it formed too close to another solar system, and there was some interaction there. We apparently captured one of their planets, probably by Neptune and/or Uranus, and scientists believe this. This is a mainstream scientific theory. And over time, it gradually precessed until it came close to the Earth to strike it. And then when it struck it with one of its satellites, and this is the Zechariah-Sitchin hypothesis, which I actually agree with, It's moved Earth closer to the sun where it is today as the third planet instead of the second. And this is why it says in the Bible, in Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. He uses the term karat instead of to create. Karat means to cut. It's probably the word we get the term carat, as in 14 carats, for a diamond, because the term karat literally means to cut, and it would be the same idea of a jeweler cutting away part of a diamond that he doesn't want. The earth was actually reduced in size somewhat by this event, so it was more in line with what God wanted. It was given an axial tilt, rotation rate, and a moon, and other features which are all necessary for life to exist. And so not only did he take it from this farther away place, which would have been too cold for life to exist, he moved it to a position closer to the sun, which is just right. It's called the Goldilocks zone. He also gave it a rapid rotation rate, so the surface would warm evenly. He gave it a tilt, so the north and south would occasionally change places to turn to the hottest location, giving summer and winter so they could create seasons. And also the moon, which is necessary for life to exist as we understand it, because the life cycle of the gravity of the moon kind of stirs things up and makes things happen, mostly in the oceans, but other places too. And so there's a lot of reasons that had to happen.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. And I think it's totally cool to agree with Sitchin on some stuff. I don't trust all his work, but I think, anyway, we could.
That's the only thing I agree with.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not Sitchin.
I didn't think that you were a full-blown follower
Not
of
at all.
his.
It's interesting science fiction.
Yes.
So much partly true. So,
okay, but what about his? Because he was saying that the Sumerians also believed in the planet Tiamat, and I think that it was once in between Mars and Jupiter where the asteroid belt is. Now, I have pondered: is that the same thing as Rahab in the Bible? And
yes.
Do you think so? I think so. Absolutely.
Rahab shows up in the Bible. Yeah. Tiamat is the Mesopotamian Sumerian version for the dragon. They all refer to the Earth. Planet Tiamat is actually planet Earth. It's the same one.
But it was okay. So, what do you think happened there? Do you think that God destroyed Tiamat and took part of it to create the Earth?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Lord divided the dragon in heaven into heaven and earth. It talks about that later in Psalm 74 and Isaiah 27:1, I think it is.
Yeah.
Where he defeats the dragon and creates the earth. It's more alluded to. It's not directly mentioned because they don't want to get too much into the mythology of it.
Yes.
But it shows up. Moses drops heavy hints in various places. Like for the term deep sea, he uses the term Tihom, which is the Hebrew version equivalent to the word Tiamat. Same word. One difference is the same thing. It's a cognate. I learned that I have a graduate degree in Old Testament biblical studies. We actually had a teacher who taught Akkadian cuneiform, and he'd have this thing called cognate corner, and one of the ones he covered was Tihom, and he said, "Prove to me my theory that it was the same word." It was. Akkadian cuneiform, which is the same language that Abraham would have known, was equivalent to Tihom. Tiamat was equivalent to Tihom in the Hebrew language. It might be a loan word or a parallel word. Remember, Abraham came out of Ur the Chaldees, which was the capital city of Sumer. And so he probably spoke Sumerian or also spoke Sumerian. And he was a Sumerian by, not by ancestry, but by where he came from, like in America. Like a Jewish man living in America is both American and Jewish in that sense. And so he brought that tradition with him, but he had the Hebrew version, which was monotheistic, whereas the Enuma Elish was polytheistic. And so they decided to remove as much as possible the names of various deities, but they left just enough in to allude back to Enuma Elish to make connections. And you see Rahab, and you see Leviathan, which Leviathan shows up as Lotan in the Canaanite mythology, and Rahab is, I think it might be unique to Hebrew. But Tiamat is actually the same word. What they do in Enuma Elish, in Sumerian, is that they add the affix at, at at the end of it. That makes it a feminine singular. It becomes a personal word, personal noun, rather than just a noun. So the Hebrews took off the at and said it's just Tihom, the deep sea. So they demythologized Enuma Elish, but kept that word in to make that linkage. And there's other places too, like you mentioned Leviathan. There's also the behemoth, the beast from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Those both show up in Job near the end.
They all seem to be dragons too. In some of the Jewish folklore I've read, Rahab is a dragon. Tiamat seems to be compared to a chaos dragon. Leviathan, I think, in Job, and it's definitely a dragon. It talks about the scales and all that. So it seems like something's going on here where they're dragons with a planetary counterpart.
Yes, they are symbolic of the actual planet.
Yeah.
The dragon is unimportant. It symbolizes the planet. That's what's important. We're actually, according to Sumerian cosmology and probably Hebrew, we're actually living on the head of Tiamat, which had been cut off from her body. So Earth is actually Tiamat's head floating through space in their conception. And the Earth is actually Behemoth's head, called Kingu in the Sumerian cosmology. He basically used Kingu, which was the equivalent of a behemoth. And in Enuma Elish, they said that Marduk, the Sumerian, actually was a Babylonian deity, which they used to replace God in the mythology. When he defeated Tiamat and divided her body into heaven and earth, using her head to form the earth, he actually cut off the head of her most powerful general, which was named Kingu, and used his head to form the moon. And so the earth is the head of the dragon, and the moon is the head of the earth beast, Kingu or behemoth. And the sea beast and the earth beast show up again in Job as Leviathan and behemoth. So there's a parallel there too. Behemoth is seen as kind of the servant of Leviathan and her chief helper, but also consorts.
I love that. Just for people listening, I did find a verse here. I'll just toss it in because I think it kind of paints the picture here. Psalm 89, 6-7. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings is like the Lord? A God feared in the council of holy ones, great and awesome among all who are around him. Then I'm going to jump to verse 9 where it says, you rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. You crushed Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. And I mean, that passage is loaded. I think it refers to the divine council early on there, but also I like that last line there where it says, so you crush Rahab like a carcass. You scattered your enemies with your mighty arm. To me, and tell me what you think, but to me, that sounds like people got off the planet and were scattered across the galaxy or something.
Could be. There's probably referring to the Earth being just shattered by that the great mighty weapon, probably a satellite planet X, that he used to shatter the Earth, because the moon was formed by some sort of an object roughly the size of Mars that actually impacted it and dug itself deep into its core. That's been proven by science. So the moon was formed when another object embedded itself inside of the Earth and pushed out all the material that later became the moon, because it cooled and solidified in Earth's orbit and stayed there as the moon. And so the only way to form the moon was by having a colliding object push that material out into space in orbit. And so that's how the moon was formed. And so that's both the Enuma Elish and Genesis 1 both recount the same divine battle in the formation of the Earth, but they use different ways of doing it. One uses a polytheistic version, the other a monotheistic version, which is actually very scientific in nature. By divorcing the names of the deities, of the actual planets from the names of the deities, it becomes maybe the world's first scientific creation document. It still has some aspects of deity in it, because God is given credit for all this. But otherwise, it's very scientific and very non-deistic at all. It's very little reference to anything divine. These are all physical objects in space, and they're not divine in any way.
I'm with that, man. I'm on board with that. I think too. And last time I checked, mainstream science, secular science, we're talking about that asteroid belt and saying that it probably was a planet, or there was a planet there at one point. So we have.
It has to be.
we have a missing space between Mars and Jupiter where
Mhm.
there's a bunch of rocks now,
Mhm.
debris. So it just makes sense. So I'm with you. Yeah, scientifically as well, it makes sense.
And not only are there rocks, the only way those rocks could have formed is from a planet forming in that location. I just realized that recently. I thought about it. You know what? If everything was gas and dust when things first formed, the only way that rocks could form is a part of a compressed body of gas and dust. Over time, the planets are all compressed gas and dust that gradually form collectively, like I mentioned, like the sun, except the Earth. The planets are like small rocky versions of the Earth. Over time, they gradually compress together and form rocks through collective gravity. Otherwise, rocks aren't formed; they just remain bits of gas and dust in space. They can only be derived from a planet that has enough gravity to compress them into rock form. Therefore, if there are rocks circling around the Earth, around the sun in a certain orbit, that proves 100% there must have been a planet there at one time.
Hmm. Yeah. Are we talking about a galactic battle here?
Maybe it might be a Star Wars type battle,
Hmm.
except using planets instead of manufactured moons. And the Death Star is way too big to ever be manufactured. It's ridiculous. Even the Star Destroyers, which are like a mile long,
Yeah.
they've taken centuries to build. There's no way. It makes for great science fiction.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
what they actually did is looks like they used planets or hollowed out asteroids to do various things in there. There's, I think, one of the moons of Jupiter or something looks like it had some kind of a weapon on top of it because it's like a long, like a raised tunnel area. Might have been Io or something, maybe one of the moons of Saturn. That could have been some sort of a particle accelerator weapon that was formed out of an existing moon of an existing planet, which could be doable. Actually, forming a moon over time would take forever, but because
Yeah,
of what
hey,
it feels,
I saw an interesting document, yeah, from the 70s. It's a CIA document. And I don't know, I'm just gonna mention it here. I don't know if it's 100% real or not, but it's a remote viewing document where the CIA remote viewed Jupiter. And apparently they traveled through the asteroid belt, and the remote viewer said that he saw starships hang out in the asteroid belt. So I just want to sprinkle that in. Thought that was
that's
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
There's probably my theory is that Satan has there are ships. It's actually a Star Wars or Star Trek type battle going on. And when you see it in Revelation 12, you're actually seeing the space fleet attacking a planet and destroying Satan's holdings there, which I believe is actually Mars. And so what we're going to see near the beginning of the middle of the tribulation, maybe year 3 or a little bit earlier, they're
Mm.
going to have a space battle, which might be visible from Earth using strong telescopes, where God's forces actually wipe out the forces of Satan on planet Mars, and they're forced to retreat to Earth for their last third out. And that's when the Antichrist comes down, or the Antichrist spirit comes down, indwells the Antichrist, and that's when things really get interesting.
Are we saying that maybe there's inhabitants on Mars right now, maybe inside of Mars?
Underneath the
I,
ground, yeah.
I say so. I'm warming up to that idea. I was on a panel 2 nights ago with a guy who just put out a film called Red Planet Blue or Blue Planet Red. I haven't seen it yet, but I talked to the guy, and he's bringing out all these details about Mars that NASA knows about, but NASA's not really putting that out. This has been ongoing since like maybe even the 60s or since the Viking mission.
Mm-hmm.
There's pictures of all this stuff that indicates that there was a civilization on Mars, and maybe they just retreated inside of the planet. So I'm warming up to the idea.
You should read The Monuments of Mars by Richard Hoagland. That's the book to read. And there are other books out there related to Hoagland's work.
Yeah.
There's one book, I forget what it's called. He also wrote Temple at the Center of Time, but he also, let me look it up here.
I like Hoagland. I mean, I listened to a lecture he did not too long ago. Very well spoken. I remember him being on Coast to Coast all the time too,
Yeah,
talking about.
he's a favorite. He's not always the best researcher, but he
Mhm.
has an interesting idea. Also, David Flynn had a very good book. Besides Temple at the Center of Time, there's one he did on Mars too.
Mm.
It was out of print and very difficult to find.
I I like David Flynn actually. So David Flynn, for people out there listening, has a book on Cydonia. Cydonia is the region up there on Mars that has
Yes.
that face and pyramids and stuff. Flynn's an interesting guy. He put up a website about the Watchers in 1993. 93, by the way, as you know, was an incredibly early time to have a website. But
Yeah,
anyway,
so that was really early.
super early. So he's like one of
Yeah.
these kind of genius guys. But Flynn pointed out the connection between the occult beliefs of the ancients and Mars, namely between theurgy and Mars. And Flynn also went into like the mysticism of place, kind of a thing, and place names, like the mirroring of heaven on earth. And he
Mhm.
was like, he pointed out that the mirroring of the heavens on earth is like a religious philosophy that it
Right.
seems like the ancients were wrapped up into. It gets into cartography and all that. And I'll add one more thing. One of the most compelling things that I liked about Flynn's work was he shows how that Avonbury Circle in England mirrors Cydonia. Like you could literally overlay the two.
Mhm.
So
That was that close. I didn't know that. Avery Circle.
yeah, I can send you a YouTube presentation he does
Yeah,
on that.
I would like to see that.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to get back to those things. David was so interesting.
Hmm.
Terrible that he died. Back in 2012. Interesting. 2012's been coming up today for me. There was the movie 2012. I just watched that.
Hmm.
Apparently, David died in 2012. That's interesting.
And I mean, I think the Mars connection, this is something that I've been interested in lately. Just um, you could get into well, basically like these old occultists, right? Like even Falconelli, whoever he was, he kind of shows up at the turn of the century. He attributed the Emerald Tablet to King Hiram of Cydonia, and there's that word again, Cydonia,
Hmm.
right? And there's all these interesting connections between people in the Middle East, namely Mesopotamia and Mars.
Hmm.
So I just thought that was, and this gets back to like, for me, this gets back to like galactic battles in scripture, because
Hmm.
you've got Ezekiel 28 that kind of describes like an entity being cast out of the stones of fire. You've got
Right.
Judges 5:4. And this is where I think you see Mars again. Judges 5:4 describes seemingly a cosmic battle between God and the region of Edom. And Edom means red. And when you read through those passages, Isaiah 34 is another one talking about a war with heaven involving Edom.
Hmm.
And
Where is that again?
Isaiah chapter 34, see if I can find it here. Um, you read through it, and there's just little things in there that seem to point to there being a celestial element to this. Like maybe, let's see here. Isaiah 34. It's a big passage. Let me see if I can find what I'm looking for. I think that this one's loaded because this one also talks about Lilith. In my Bible, it actually says Lilith with a capital L.
Hmm.
It says Lilith shall find a place to rest in the old capital of Edom, which was Basra. Here you go. When my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens, lo, it will descend upon Edom, upon the people I have doomed to judgment. The Lord has a sword, it is sated with blood, it is gorged with fat, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys and rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Basra, a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Wild oxes shall fall with them, and young steers with mighty bulls, and their land shall be soaked with blood.
Hmm.
So, and it just keeps going here. It describes this battle that it sounds like God himself and his hosts waged with Edom.
Hmm.
Because in this whole passage here, instead of it talking about the Israelites themselves fighting with them on the battlefield, it's talking about God fighting with them on the battlefield.
Right.
Oh, okay. If I back
This
up,
this
uh
sounds like Revelation here with the stars in the sky.
yeah,
Both.
so yeah, if I back up a little bit here in verse 3, it says, Their slain shall be cast out, the stench of their corpses shall rise, the mountains shall flow with their blood. All the host of heaven shall not rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll.
Right.
So, are we talking about a war between Israelites and Edomites, or are we talking about a war where God himself was involved?
It sounds like God.
Yeah, that's what
These
I
are
thought.
massive amounts of asteroids falling. One of the things I've noticed in studying the Book of Revelation is it sounds like most of the judgments, the bowls, the trumpets and the bowls, many of them have to do with asteroids falling. Lots of smaller ones or a handful of larger ones, and or comets. A great star burning like a torch is probably a comet, burning like a lamp. But the burning mountain is probably an asteroid. And the burning mountain drops into the sea and destroys 1/3 of all life at sea. That's pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of it'll probably have to hit the Pacific area because that's the largest area and where the most life is. It would have to hit that area. That would, of course, destroy all those islands, including Hawaii. So divest from Hawaii if that's not going to be around for much longer. The Revelation talks about the seals, the 6 seals. That's where things start getting interesting. Well, it's all interesting, but
Yeah, while you're pulling that up, I'm gonna add one more thing to this.
yeah, that's the imagery there is reminiscent of one thing of Revelation 6,
Okay.
12. The stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. This is almost a direct quote of that Isaiah passage, actually. So if you read them next to each other, it's pretty much identical. A lot of people have noted, basically, John takes imagery from all over the Bible and basically assembles it in the book of Revelation. So you have to go back to the originals to figure out what he meant by that.
I got another one for you. I'm gonna toss this in because it has to do with Edom as well. This is Judges 5:4. Lord, when you went out from Seir, which is Mount Seir is in the middle of Edom, the Edomite territory. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens poured. The clouds indeed poured water, and the mountains quaked before the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm getting that celestial involvement, heavenly involvement with that. And Edom means red. So is that symbolic somehow of Mars being involved? I don't know.
Possibly. The Lord marched. Does this say anything about the Merkabah there? Do you know?
About the what?
The Merkabah?
Ooh.
Are you familiar with that?
I've heard that word. I'm trying to remember if I saw that recently in one of these.
It often appears in Jewish mysticism, but it actually is in the Bible. It's actually what appears to be some sort of a craft that God appears to Ezekiel in Ezekiel 1. He describes it in detail and also shows up later appearing about the temple and things like that. And it's some sort of a craft that God uses to travel around through the earth and kind of maybe keep an eye on things.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a ship because it's just an object that moves through the air and it has engines of some kind which make it move around. So it's probably some kind of what we call a spacecraft, most likely. And if God has to have some kind of physical object moving around in space to do various things that he as a spirit cannot do, he probably uses these things to take care of little things he needs to have done, like little errand boy kind of situations. So sending angels, sometimes the angels might need a little more power, so they'll build up a ship to achieve certain goals. And so it's probably that kind of ship which battles with Satan on Mars, defeats his ships, and sends them scurrying back to Earth where they set up their last redoubt against the second coming. And so what we're seeing in the end times is Satan's forces being concentrated on Earth, and where Jesus himself is required to defeat them because they're so much more powerful when they're concentrated. And I suspect what we've been seeing with the buildup of our militaries is Satan's forces giving mankind technology to help them build defenses against the second coming. Like the Golden Dome, for example. It's a classic example of exactly the sort of thing that the Nephilim would give mankind to defend against incoming asteroids or imperial ships, or the equivalent. So in this case, God's forces are the Empire, and Satan's forces are the rebellion. But unlike in Star Wars, the good guys are the Empire and the bad guys are the rebels. I've come to the conclusion that Star Wars was originally intended to be propaganda against the Second Coming, to prepare people against this coming planet and the massive fleet that's coming with it as the bad guys. And the rebels, or the Jedi, or the good guys who are fighting the just cause, but in fact they're actually demon-possessed psychopaths who are intending to enslave mankind. And God is actually rescuing mankind from the rebels.
Allegory, or something like it. Yeah. I mean, I like what you're saying too about the fleet. You know, when we talk about the host of heaven, that's what I was doing over here. I was trying to find this verse about the host of heaven. I don't know if this is the one I was looking for, but it's Deuteronomy 17:2. It says, the Israelites are not to worship other gods or the host of heaven, or the punishment would be severe. So this is putting a new spin on the conversation. I know that like those, I'll just add this, that it's not, the punishment is not because the gods weren't real. I don't know how to word this. Israelites didn't face punishment for communing with an imaginary fiction.
Right.
But my deeper point here is that you get this word host, and then you get the word principalities in some of these verses. And I just think that if we're talking about princes of regions, they're going to have an army.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that falls right along with there being some sort of a fleet of ships, heavenly technology.
Mm-hmm. Probably the mankind will be given technology that allowed them to fly spaceships and have battles in space.
Mm-hmm.
We see various giants actually seen as possibly traveling into space. There's the lid of Palenque in South America, which appears to be having a king of, here's the Aztecs, or maybe the Maya, flying what appears to be a rocket ship with his hands on these controls and those pedals. There's actually kind of a viewport and even a nose piece which you could use to breathe. It's possible, and maybe probable, that the giants were actually taught about spacecraft and computers and what we understand as science by their fallen angel fathers, because these are the giants who the fallen angels came down and created. And it's pretty likely they would have taught them arts and sciences and technology so they could become more effective on Earth, because the whole point of the giants was to conquer and control the other races of mankind and bring them under control of the fallen angels by proxy. And so the giants were created as proxies for their fathers, the fallen angels, and given knowledge of arts and sciences and technology so they could continue to control people through that method. Having technology greatly multiplies the power of an individual, so one person can control many that way.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like the Watchers knew that they had to become human somehow to be able to sort of govern this realm. Because, and this, for me, this goes back to a galactic war, or a rebellion, a heavenly rebellion, which I've got Ezekiel 28 here, which talks about that. Basically, it says, and you were in Eden, you were the seal of perfection, you were full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You had every precious stone adorned you. You were as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were blameless in your ways until the day wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mount of God. I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. So it's almost like once rebellion and once wickedness was found in these heavenly beings, God was like, I can't trust you anymore. So then did he create mankind? Because he needed a new, or wanted a new, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, It might have been. I talked about Planet X earlier, its creation, because I wanted to get back to a point where there may have been a satanic civilization that preceded the human one. And when God recreated the Earth created the Earth from this existing planet, that civilization was destroyed in the process. So it was a creative destruction of destroying a previous civilization, basically sterilizing the surface of the Earth, because massive object striking the surface of the Earth would have rendered the entire Earth molten for maybe thousands of years. And so that would have destroyed everything. There would have been nothing left. And so by destroying the satanic civilization, he destroyed everything they'd built and the technologies and everything, and all the things he was doing, and the abuse of power that he saw. He misused his knowledge to maybe make himself extraordinarily wealthy. And the words here in Theory of Widespread Trade seems to be unfair trading practices, where he would rip people off, and like the Canaanites would later do. And so there's a pattern there of ripping people off and stealing from them. And
yeah, and in fact, in the chapter above the one I just read, they admonished the king of Tyre for those exact same trading practices.
yes, that's right.
Yeah. And
So
he
the
was
same pattern.
Phoenician, Canaanite, I think.
Yes, he was Phoenician.
Mm-hmm.
And same situation. He's cast out. And it was interesting because he was associated with these worms too. One of the theories I have is that nanotech was introduced in the garden too. And there was kind of a pattern of worms being at major points in the Israelites' history. For example, when the Israelites lived in the wilderness, there were these kind of worms that came out of the ground and ate up the remaining manna. And also, when at the time of when Jesus was born, the place where Jesus was born around there, I forget the name of it. It was also named after a worm too, the place of the Rama, the Rima worm. So the voice calls out in Rama. Rachel's children have been destroyed, something like that. Rama is based on the word Rima, which means worm also. And also the one of the later Herods was eaten of worms also. And also the Protestant Council was taking place in a place called Worms, Germany. And there's kind of this, the word for generations in Hebrew is very similar to the word for worms also, the Toledot worm or Tolia worm. And so there seems to be a worm pattern, which has to do with something to do with generations, which I'm seeing with the technologies. One of the technologies they may have had, which Satan uses to manage and control the earth, is this technology, which is like this nanotech worm. The serpent in the garden might have been not a large serpent. It might have been a very small nano worm, which invaded the body and took it over from within. And so, I don't know if you've ever heard of Morgellons. You ever heard of Morgellons? Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of that. It's a condition, right?
It's Morgellons is actually a nanovirus that invades people and has fibers growing out of their skin and coming out of their tear ducts and stuff like that. And so when I put that together, the worm motif and the fact that there's some sort of a nanovirus going on that causes fibers to grow out of people's skin, I noted in the text of Genesis 3 when it says thorns and thistles will grow, in the land, in the field. The word there is not third person referring to field, it's referring second person to Adam and Eve. It says thorns and thistles will grow out of you personally. So I think what was happening is the thorns and thistles were some kind of nanovirus that invaded their bodies, just like Morgellons, because people report these kind of fibrous materials growing out of the skin. So they're actually made of cellulose, actually. And the Morgellons is. And I'm thinking maybe the serpent was actually a nanobot that had invaded their body and formed networks of fibers that could perform certain tasks, like allow, if there's an implanted central chip, the chip could hook up to various parts of the body and send what you call impulses to the arms and legs, the muscles to move. In fact, it's possible if you use nanobots to build fibers inside the body, which you can do. You can create an electrical network, which you can use to control the body centrally. You could actually make the body move like a puppet that way. You could also replace the nervous system and send messages to the mind. So you could actually broadcast messages, which could be picked up by these little wires that the nanobots apparently weave inside of Magellan sufferers. And they could actually use it to create a huge antenna, which could pick up, broadcast radio waves that you can get from these 5G towers. You could actually broadcast messages to people through this network using these fibers as a huge antenna.
Mm-hmm.
So between the fibers and that antenna structure, people have noticed that some Morgellons fibers act like antenna. Some of them act like power transmitters, and various different things they can do. If you could do that, you could actually remote control a human being from a computer remote from a distance from that onboard ship. You could use the electricity to stimulate their body to do whatever you want. The fibers will grow all the way to the muscle and send it shocks to make it contract. And once it gets coordinated, it can actually cause a person to move around and do whatever it wants from remote. I think that's what's going to happen to those who get the mark of the beast. They're going to be not only have that chip, they're going to have fibers connecting to the chip and actually making it so that the person literally becomes a puppet of the system. This is what happens in Revelation 9 when people are being stung by those scorpions. They're being injected by these little nanobots, which go inside of the body, weave these fibers, and make them slaves of the central computer. There's more to it than that, but I think that's basically what's going on.
Yeah.
I looked into Hebrew, and there's actually evidence to support that. Samson, for example, might have been overcome by this stuff, stung by what's called in Joshua, for example, the angel of the Lord appeared and said to them, "Don't attack. I'm going to send out the Zaria hornet to drive the giants out from their caves and crevices." So this angel, the angel of the Lord, actually had his command a huge host of hornets. I suspect those actually would be mechanical hornets, and he created for that purpose, which could be remote controlled. Interesting enough, the similar word shows up in the story of Samson, where he was born in the town of Zaria or whatever it was. And I think a lot of these stories about these heroes, including Elijah and also Moses, is actually not only a story of Elijah and Moses, but an explanation of what this technology was and how it operates and what you can do with it. And so what he's doing through these stories, he's teaching holy men of God, I'm going to give you this technology in the future, and when you do, you'll know how to use it, because I taught you through the scriptures, which is also a training manual for how to use these technologies. I've come to that conclusion that certain stories are actually designed to teach people how these technologies work. Mm-hmm. And the end times remnant will probably be using this to achieve great feats.
Mm-hmm. One of the thoughts I had there was that you see a pattern in scripture where when somebody falls out of favor with God, he seems to lift his veil of protection around them. I think you see that with the garden, of course, Adam and Eve. I think you see it. Samson's a great example. He cuts his hair and he kind of falls out of favor with God. It's like maybe he's more susceptible to this stuff. And even Solomon, King Solomon himself, talked about how the moment he went and offered a sacrifice, I think, to Baal or Moloch, he felt the presence of God leaving him. And now he was susceptible to the enemy. In fact, he said he turned to witchcraft because he didn't have God helping him out anymore. He didn't have the shield. He didn't have the hedge of protection that God provided. So now he was trying to create his own shield using witchcraft. And it's like, it's just a thought that I had, like, okay, maybe you're more susceptible to this technology that you're describing if you fall out of favor with God. I don't know. Just a thought also, that I had.
The technology is the technology that Samson had was the evil technology. There's two different kinds.
Yes.
The good technology, which is based around the basically what the high priest wore, and the evil technology, which is like the nanobots I was talking about. What was happening was what Satan does, and there's all kinds of interesting evidence in mythology, and including Egyptian mythology to support this, is that the Zohar, there was something called the Zohar stone. And it shows up in Genesis 6:16 as the what they thought was a hole in the ceiling, a window in the ceiling to bring in light. But even at noonday, it's only briefly a small amount of light would come in, and only for part of the upper deck. The lower decks would have light, and most of the upper deck would be dark too. But if you look at the word Zohar, it actually is based on the word for stone, and some of the words like shining. So it's Zohar correctly translated as shining stone. And this is very important to understand because this is actually a key mystery of the Old Testament, and very important to understand, is the shining stone actually shows up in Jewish mythology as some sort of a device that actually has magical powers. And for example, it was kept by the patriarchs of the ancient world, and every time they slept at night, it bathed them in this magical light, which renewed their bodies every night, and they woke up refreshed every morning. And also, Abraham wore 8 Zohar around his neck as kind of a necklace and used it to heal people. And so, I suspect this is a kind of a sort of a technology which is good or evil. In fact, it might actually be the tree of knowledge of good or evil, depending on who's using it. And Abraham using it, it used for good, and that might be the reason he was able to fight off an entire army with only 318 men. It gave him extraordinarily a powerful military capability, so that he was basically a one-man army. And King David actually tried to use that to conquer the world. It was so powerful. It was like a great red jewel that he wore on his head.
Yeah.
Same as the Eye of Ra, basically.
Yeah. So going back to this passage I read earlier in Ezekiel 28, it says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorns you: carnelian, crystallite, emerald, topaz, onyx, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared." It's got to be some sort of technology with the stones.
What he's saying here is that the king of Tyre had the Zohar, and he referenced it back to the time when that stone, the Zohar, sat on its pole in the middle of the garden and was basically kind of a computer they could access as an artificially intelligent computer. Well, that's interesting, but there was a dark side. And the dark side, as his name was also known as Lucifer. Lucifer was not a human. If you look at the Lucifer passage, actually, the nouns describing Lucifer's creation are not of a person being born, but of an idol being carved. And so it's a physical object that's not alive. In my opinion, Lucifer is actually the Zohar stone, an artificially sentient computer into which Cain and other ancient peoples embedded their memories and thoughts in their entire brains so that they would be carried on into the future. And so that future people will put the Zohar on their head will actually be able to see all the knowledge of Cain and everyone else who ever wore this thing on their head.
So is Satan like some sort of an evil energy field that's able to embed himself in the nanotech and the stones?
I should explain. The Zohar was probably created by God or by Satan to allow them as a spirit to interact with the physical world in a very efficient way. So Satan is as to the Zohar as Sauron is to the ring. Kind of. It's like that. He put a lot of his energy and ability into the ring, and it became part of him in it. But basically, the spirits could not interact with the physical world, so they created these machines to do it for them. There's actually an original Star Trek series. I forget which one it was. It was like these big shining spheres, which are filled with the memories of ancient beings from an ancient world. This is probably what they're talking about, because some of the stories of the Gnostics and people like that, they believe the ancients of the world before the flood actually embedded their memories and knowledge and personalities in these stones. And so we're seeing now, and Elon Musk is actually trying to do this now. You can record your brain into a stone using technology so that future generations can interact with you and possibly even talk with them as a sort of an AI agent. And so Cain and Noah and Moses probably were too, as did probably Elijah. We can see what they were thinking, because it might be their brains might be recorded in this thing as part of the vast amount of knowledge that this tree of knowledge holds.
Yeah. Wow. And I was just thinking about Star Trek literally being about this, and there's kind of a story there that backs this up. If you look into the Nine, there's like a government UFO panel that were researching this celestial group of entities called the Nine, and Gene Roddenberry was in the room, and he
No
was
kidding.
yes, this is a
Wow.
crazy story. He
That's
knew that
amazing.
he knew that Andrea Puharovich guy. They're all like they're CIA, like MK Ultra, like occultists essentially. And they were channeling this group of entities called the Nine. Roddenberry's in the room taking notes. Roddenberry goes on to base Star Trek off of some of the stuff he heard happening in this room.
Right. I believe that.
Crazy.
He was doing some very Gnostic stuff and Kabbalic stuff. Spock was like
Yeah.
a Kabbalist, and the other folks were Gnostics. They're very Gnostic concepts. And like the Return of the Archons is one obvious one, that episode, where the people on a particular planet were perfectly peaceful, but they had 1 hour a day where they just went crazy and attacked each other. It was very interesting. But they were used to the term Archons. The Archons were the principalities, the princes of the heavenly host who fell, and who rebelled against God. And the Gnostics worshiped the Archons as gods and derived their knowledge from them. And so the Gnostics worshipped angels and served them and gained knowledge from them. This is why the Bible specifically prohibits that, because he doesn't want us to know that, because his knowledge is like the Book of Enoch. It's probably the same people. The knowledge they give you is amazing and technologically advanced, but it leads to self-destruction. Just as the Book of Enoch says, men repented against what they had done because they had so many people had died because of all the wars that were caused by the massive technologies they'd created because of the knowledge that the fallen angels had given them. And so what we're seeing is we're on that same suicidal path right now, where mankind is building up massive technologies to fight against each other and conquer the world. In fact, what we might be seeing in the book of Revelation is the use of that technology as a two-step process. One, conquer and consolidate the world into one powerful ruler, and then two, launch attacks against heaven to retake the throne of God away from Satan. And so, or to retake the throne of God away from Jesus. So Satan is trying to unify Earth, give us technology that can provide a challenge against heavenly order, and use us to supplement his forces as part of a larger army to retake heaven. So probably what's happening with the Mars conflict I was mentioning, which is probably what Revelation 12 is talking about, is that in order to preempt such a potential attack from Mars, Jesus will send Michael and his forces to destroy Satan's holdings on Mars, drive them back to the earth, while Jesus himself will come and finish them off.
Yeah, wow. And I'm thinking about this idea of occultism itself being like a doctrine of the dark side, and
Yeah.
how it's not the true path, but it's kind of disguised as a path for bringing people closer to knowledge and all that. And I was thinking about Hermes and Hermeticism being a brand of that doctrine of the dark side. And I'm thinking about Hermes, who said that Egypt was the city of the cosmos, and Cairo means Mars.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to tie all this in. I don't know how I'm going to tie all this in, but you've got me thinking about a lot of different concepts here, and I'm trying to make them all make sense. But I think what I'm trying to say here is, in some regard, Star Wars got it right. There's a light side of the Force and a dark side of the Force, essentially.
Kind of. There's a rebel faction that's causing problems. It's powerful enough to be a problem, but not powerful enough to really take over heaven. It's just, yeah, it's strong enough to be a problem. And I think it's taken a very long time to bring them under control. I suspect in the beginning, when there was the creation of the earth or the universe, Satan and his forces used to roam freely, and it took God's forces a long time to corral them into this part of the galaxy. And there might have been many battles fought over a period of millions of years, who knows, where they're constantly struggling with these demons, or it's just very, very tricky and find ways out of these traps that God is trying to close them in closer and closer and closer. Now he has them trapped in his solar system. He has them trapped in the inner solar system, probably. And the next step is to conquer the inner solar system and finish them off. So we're about to see the last step in this conquest that might have taken millions of years of amazing space battles. And the salvation history with the covenants. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept. Or there's the Noahic covenant, and the Abrahamic covenant, and the Mosaic covenants. These represent milestones and continue to hem in and limit the ability of Satan to do damage, to do things, to do evil, until Jesus himself comes back. Or there's the Jesus covenant after Moses, and then there's the next covenant when Jesus returns. He'll create another covenant with mankind, and then there will be a final covenant after the millennium, and then that'll be it. There might be one more covenant, because since we'll be resurrected, there'll be no more need for covenants, because Satan will be finally defeated. I guess we'll find out. But in my opinion, the new Earth is actually not a redeemed Earth. It's actually a new planet altogether, Planet X, which is actually the planet that's being created to replace Earth as kind of an upgrade.
Oh, wow.
Better planet for us.
Yeah.
So this planet is here to judge mankind, and then the next planet will be as our eternal home.
Oh, so there's going to be some world hopping.
Right. And so Earth itself will be probably hurled into the sun and destroyed there.
Mm-hmm.
The book of Isaiah says the Earth is clean dissolved. And Revelation says the Earth was not, which means it was not there anymore. It was gone. So the only way to destroy the Earth to the point where it's totally gone would be to put it in the sun. And Jesus says the world will be destroyed like so much wood, hay, and stubble, burned up with intense heat. The only way to destroy the Earth is to throw it into the sun or other star, because that's the only place that's hot enough to destroy such a large object. Since the sun is basically a giant ball of fusion reactions, I believe. And so Earth will eventually be rendered down to its constituent elements and become part of the mixture out of which it came in the first place.
Yeah. So when it says I go to prepare a place, are we talking about cities on another planet?
The New Jerusalem will be on Planet X,
Mm.
which will have some new name then.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, X just means unknown. But what we call Planet X will be the new Earth, and the New Jerusalem will be our heavenly abode. A massive pyramid, which is so tall, if it landed on Earth, it's probably the top 1/3 of it would actually be in space, or pretty close to it. Actually, the top part of it would be almost in space. And so it's a giant. It's like covers pretty much North America if it was on the Earth. And it's probably a couple thousand feet. I forget the exact measure, but it's more than we'd ever need. So each one of us would have probably a space that's miles and miles long, hundreds maybe of square miles.
I think I've seen a lot of confusion with people who think that Planet X is going to be some sort of an asteroid or a comet, and I don't know if so. There's all these verses here, like a Joel 2:10. The earth shall tremble before him, the heavens shall shake, the sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And then you've got Revelation 6:13, Revelation 8:10, Ezekiel 32:7-9. They seem to be describing something. The heavens are awry. And I think some people think that's a comet or an asteroid that's coming through to destroy everything. What do you think about that?
Where is that again, Ezekiel?
Oh, Ezekiel 32:7-9. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I wrote this down as a verse that kind of talks about upheaval in the atmosphere.
This is about the Pharaoh. They're talking about the Pharaoh in Ezekiel 32.
Okay.
This, I will snuff you up. I will cover the heavens, darken their stars. That's a good question. Let's talk about Ezekiel. Ezekiel is after. So maybe he'll drop an asteroid on there. Yeah, let's probably do it.
Yeah. I will snuff you out. I will cover the heavens. I will darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. I should read the full chapter here, though. So, yeah, lament over the Pharaoh.
It's probably Egypt being hit by an asteroid during the time of Ezekiel.
Yeah. So, this is something that already happened. Okay. Well, maybe I should take that verse off the list then.
No, it's interesting to study. But
yeah. I think what I did there was I just went through and just wrote down a bunch of verses that apply to things like that happening. And I should have given them a timeline. But I think my point is more so is that I see a lot of people online treating Planet X like a killer comet that's coming to destroy everything.
Yeah.
And I'm not gathering that at all from our conversation today. Planet X seems like a pretty cool place.
It's being prepared as our future home, I believe. There is mention of a new Earth, and the old Earth is clearly gone. So,
yeah, it says it was not. The Earth was not.
It's not there. It's being polite about it, but it's gone.
Yeah.
And so, by implication, humanity's gone too. So it's not necessarily something you want to play up to market to people, the gospel, saying, "Oh, some in the future, mankind will disappear," because unless they escape, which they probably won't, they'll be gone. So that's why it's important to get in line, get your soul prepared now, not become part of the people who just go away.
Yeah. If we could go back to the beginning for a second, we're kind of talking about the end, or maybe the end of the earth and a new beginning. But if we could go back to the beginning, I wanted to ask you, what do you think of Nakash and the pre-human or pre-Adamic entities?
Nachash, I believe, is actually a reference to the nano worm I was mentioning before.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the Nachash should be seen as any kind of electrical device. The electricity is the core concept of Azazel, actually. Azazel literally means power, God. Oz basically means power. It could also mean goat, but it really means power. The goat kind of symbolizes the power of the earth, the power of the nefesh energy, the soul energy that comes from the earth. Basically means electricity, in my opinion. So the term Oz literally means a positive negative electrical flow. Now, if we live in a satanic empire at the end times, as I think we are, everything's run by electricity. And so if you're talking about Satan and his way of doing things, his way of his empire building, his way of powering his weapons, you're talking about electrical power. And so Oz, in that sense, is probably electricity. And if, when electricity moves, it also makes it sound like that. Oz. So Azazel is probably an onomatopoeia, which is a word that sounds like it's spelled. And so like a buzz is like a bee. So Oz is like the flow of electricity. So it's Oz positive, Oz negative, and a cycle. And he's the god of electricity. And since all God, small g God, and since all electricity is based on the flow of electrons, he is by extension maybe the god of the electron. Nothing can happen in the universe unless there's a swapping of electrons from atom to atom or change of states within the existing atom. All chemical reactions have to do exclusively with the change of state of electrons. If you can master the electron, you're a master of the universe and can do anything. So I suspect that Azazel was one of the angels when they fell, took control of the electron as part of the God's grand design. Maybe he had it before the creation of the universe. But in either case, I suspect Azazel controls everything in a sense that he controls the electron. Jesus probably controls the rest of the atom or the interior of the atom. But I suspect the reason Satan is such a problem is because he controls the electron. And that gives him godlike powers. Not as much as God, but so powerful that he can help dictate the direction that the universe goes. And so, if that is true, and that means he has powerful technology also, which is basically electrical in nature. And so, anything that he creates or is related to him is going to be electrical. And the Nachash is probably an electrical device because it has something to do with energy of some kind. I suspect that was electricity. For example, the ultimate example of the Nachash outside of the Zohar sorry, is you've probably seen the light bulb of Dendera. It's like a light bulb shaped object that was found in the temple of Dendera. It's like there was a drawing, a hieroglyph, whatever it's called, in the carving in the wall. It's basically this large light bulb shaped implement on top of a stand, and inside of it looks like a serpent, and that looks like the filament inside of a bulb. I suspect that light bulb of Dendera was actually a thing, and it was a thing. It actually was a working electrical light bulb. It was really large. It was probably used by those who painted the insides of tombs to light the interior so they could paint everything. It has to be electricity because nothing else works. Reflected sunlight would not be enough. Torches would have left all kinds of residue. Even lamps would have left something. And so they must have had electrical light. And I suspect there was probably some speculate, I think, including I think David Flynn, that the Great Pyramid, or maybe one or more of the other pyramids, or all three of them, were able at one time generate wireless electricity, which emanated from their peaks and was able to power objects like this based on this wireless electricity. So they could take these bulbs underground and use them to light the underground, not to worry about cords. They just picked up the wireless electricity. And so they had a high degree of mastery of electricity, similar to that of Tesla, or maybe more advanced, because Tesla actually started off doing wireless electricity that he was able to broadcast from his behemoth tower. There's that word again, behemoth. Mm-hmm. The power of electricity. You see how this comes full circle. It's not just the mythology, there's also concrete evidence. And these guys know what they're talking about. They understand the myths and the concepts. So he calls his tower the behemoth tower. That's for a very specific reason. This was the power of the gods, the electricity. David Houcher Childress had a great book called Technology of the Gods, which I also recommend. He's more of a fringe researcher, not a Christian, but he has some great insights on technology and in the ancient world, which you should read about. And also another very good book is Lost Secrets of the Sacred Ark by Lawrence Gardner, which talks about how the Ark of the Covenant worked as a technological device, and most importantly, monatomic gold, which powered the device. Monatomic gold is a key concept which you need to understand. Mm-hmm. You want to understand the technology of God and of Satan. God's technology, the core technology, was the monatomic gold, and Satan's core technology was the Zarat worm, and these two were at conflict with each other. That's why we see this episode in the Exodus where you have this leftover manna, which some speculate was partly made of monatomic gold, which was then eaten by this worm. The worm and the manna were enemies. And so I deduced from that the monatomic gold was the basis of an entire array of electrical technologies that God used to help manage the earth, including the Merkabah and everything else. Satan, however, was not able to master this, possibly because it hurt him, or he didn't understand it or something. So he created an alternative technology based on nanotech. And he used this Zohar computer to create and manipulate huge hordes of Zarya hornets that'll kind of show up in Revelation 9, complete with stinger. And they would fly around and sting people with their stinger and fill them with the Zarat virus, which is in the form of a tiny larval worm which actually burrowed inside the host and started weaving these fibers. Eventually, the Zohar could actually send out broadcast signal and use the fibers that the Zarat worm weaved inside the host to control the host and enslave them. That's what will happen in the end times. Those who take the mark will be infested with this stuff, and the central beast computer will be able to remote control them and use them in his war against God.
Yeah. The Egyptians had a substance called bifkits. It was basically
I think monatomic gold. The Egyptian Book of the Dead refers to an extra dimensional realm called the Field of Mifkets. And it was thought of as like a superconductive energy field associated with metallurgy. And it had something to do with the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. And it
Mhm.
also seems to be associated with pyramids and, of course, the Ark of the Covenant.
Right. That's basically what Lost Teachings of the Sacred Ark is about. So you're already there.
Yeah.
But I recommend reading it too because it'll reinforce what you already know.
Yeah.
What was your source on the Mifkets?
Lost Secrets of the Ancient Art.
Oh, you've read it. Okay. So
I've read parts of it, yeah.
that's why you're wryly smiling at me instead of saying, okay, I'll read it.
Well,
you read that already.
Well, no, I mean, you were bringing out some stuff that I wasn't familiar with. I read through that book for some research, and I didn't have time to finish the whole thing. So that's where I'm at with that.
It's not a Christian book, but there's some interesting ideas. The idea of mono gold is very interesting. It would answer a lot of questions.
Yeah.
For example, when Moses reached his hand into his belt, which is called the Hak belt in Hebrew, he pulls it out and says it's like snow white, like shellac. It's like snow, it says. White like snow, they think. And it has to do with the Zerat somehow. The same virus I'm talking about, is this deadly virus, or maybe it's just a controlling virus. Then he puts his hand back in, and it's gone again. I wonder if he stuck his hand in the belt, it got covered with this monatomic gold and looked white like snow. Probably the belt was powered by snow, or by monatomic gold. That's why he got his hand looking like snow. Why it looked like Zerat is anyways, because Zerat might be a kind of illusion back to the gold too. But another interesting idea I had, if that was actually monatomic gold, and monatomic gold, according to Gardner and others, actually reduces the weight of those who wear it or eat it down to less than 1% of their actual mass. So it makes you light as a feather if you eat it, or, for example, wear a belt full of this. And so it might be that Moses and possibly others who wore such a device could actually leap up in the air, or maybe even leap a tall building in a single bound. Because they're so light, they could do that. And there's a type of gold, I think it's called the Uphaz or something like that, which literally means leaping gold. That might be reference to that monatomic gold also. And it might explain why Elijah was able to outrun Ahab when going back to the capital, I think it was Jerusalem. He wasn't running faster than the horses. It says he cinched up his girdle or something. If he was wearing a belt that had monatomic gold in it, like Moses did, he could then leap the entire mountain rather than having to run up it. You could jump right over it. And so Elijah was not actually outrunning the horses. He was leaping over the entire mountain in a single bound and probably got back to Jerusalem.
Wow.
Maybe about a tenth of the time as Ahab.
That sounds more like giving somebody the ability to fly than just to jump.
Effectively.
Yeah.
In fact, if he had jumped if not for the fact that some of the mass was left over, Elijah would have jumped into space and died there because it would have kept going.
Yeah.
Unless winds brought him back down. It's interesting that it's like 99.44% or some 98.6% or something. Mass is reduced. If you didn't have some mass to pull you back down, you just fly off into space. So It's interesting that God designed it so it's just the right amount of lightness so that you can fly a long distance but not fly into space. It's interesting. This is how the monocle net is set up naturally. It's not like you can adjust it. Or maybe you can, who knows. But
well, there's that story of the golden calf as well that was ground down and the Israelites ate it or drank it.
The calf, that's right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's a good angle too. Probably what Moses did, he didn't ground it down. What he did is he ran through the process of converting it to monatomic. And this is one of the reasons I think this is true. First of all, let's do a little backstory. This is also core important information you need to know. The actual Mount Sinai was not the ones we talk about now. There was a mountain called Serpent al-Qadim, which is a twin peak mountain in west central Sinai Peninsula. It's actually right off the main road. It's not hard to find. And on one side of it has a mountain called Jebel Sanaya, and the other side is Jebel Horabi, which would correspond to the biblical Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb, because Jebel in Arabic means mountain. So you have Jebel, you have Mount Sinai, and Mount Horeb, and in the middle of them you have Serpent al-Qadim. This is the mountain that Moses probably referred to as cryptically as part of a cipher to hide the true identity. As
To hide what? I'm sorry.
hide the true identity of the actual Mount Sinai.
Oh, I see. Okay.
They're keeping it secret because there's stuff here that they don't want you to know. In fact, I think one of the reasons we've been misled about what it was is because modern researchers understand that it also needs to be avoided also. Partly because if this is the right place, there's probably an entrance to the underworld not too far from there, which is very dangerous. Probably the same place that Inanna in her descent to the underworld went into there.
Oh, wow.
And
So it's like a portal location.
Right. And so that is the place. It's a very dangerous area. And so they don't want you to go there. Stay away from Seraph. It's dangerous, and it'll be featuring in the end times, prominently, I suspect. That might be where the pit is opened, the Revelation 9.
Wow. And Inanna is associated with that?
Inanna is associated. This is one of the reasons I'm very, very certain about the theory I mentioned about the Zohar stone computer, the Zaria hornet, and the Zarat worm, is that there's many corollaries that it explains. For example, when Inanna went into the underworld, she had to take off all these protective garments that protected her from something down there. What did she need protection from? When she got down to the bottom, she went to these 9 levels or something, took off these 9 garments at each level. And at the bottom, she was just totally naked and totally defenseless. And down there was her sister, who was like this lion goddess, not unlike Sekhmet of Egyptian myths. And when she got down there, she got affected by this strange disease, which caused feathers to grow out of her skin. Remember her feather-like object. It wasn't clear. The translation is unclear. I suspect she picked up the Zarat down there, and those garments were there to protect her from that Zarat. He was probably wearing the priestly garment like the Ketanet, which is designed to protect you. Job, by the way, also probably wore a Ketanet, which is this priestly garment. And the reason he had sores is because he took off that garment and Job said, when Satan said, hey, skin for skin, meaning if you take off that skin-tight garment, which is protecting him from me, he'll get the Zarat virus disease, and then he'll curse you because you did not protect him. You allowed me to hurt him. And so she had a similar garment, as did Noah. And when Ham uncovered the nakedness of Noah, that means he took off that skin-tight garment, which was protecting him. Whoever wore that garment is basically the king because it protects you from anything, including physical weapons. And so I can get into that some other time, but
yeah,
basically,
is that kind of like Esau's or Nimrod's garment as well?
Exact same thing.
Okay.
Ham gave it down to Ham gave it to Canaan or somebody, one of his sons, who eventually came down to Nimrod. Okay. Nimrod was wearing the Ketanet, and it also made you able to be invisible, I suspect. There's a story called the Ring of Gyges, which you should also look up, another very important tale which explains some things. The Gyges was a king of Lydia who, I think he was a farmer, and when he dug in his field, he found a hole in the ground, and in the ground there was a hollow horse, he called it. So something that someone was riding, but he was riding inside of it. So it's probably like a downed UFO or something like that, some kind of a vehicle. And he looked at the guy, and he was wearing this strange garment, and on his finger was this ring. And when he put the ring on it, essentially the garment also, he became invisible. And Gyges used this to literally backstab his way to the top of the kingship of Lydia, became the king of Lydia by killing everybody else because he was invisible. So the Ring of Gyges became a morality tale. If someone were given the gift of invisibility or similarly powerful ability, will they use it for good or evil? In this case, Gyges used it for evil. I suspect for that reason that the Ketanet actually allows one to become invisible also.
Okay.
And so this is the reason, and Tolkien was aware of this and embedded it in his stories, Lord of the Rings. The magic ring, which gave you the ability to go invisible, and also the mithril shirt, which made you invincible. He divided the Ketanet into 2 pieces. The magic ring, which made you invisible, and also the mithril shirt, which made you invincible. But they should be considered to be together as one unit working together. And so this is an example of the technologies I was talking about, the holy technologies, gold-based technologies, and probably what's happening with the Ketanet. Ketnet literally means like a linen garment. The term katan, it basically is the word where we get cotton, probably.
Oh, wow.
Back then they had linen, though. But cotton is so similar, they probably derived it from the ketnet. And the ketnet is the core, like the base on which you array all the other technologies.
Sure.
She was probably wearing a ketnet when she went down there. She had this necklace and a headdress, probably a ring, and a bunch of other stuff she had to take off as part of the process of going down, because her sister refused to let her come down unless she took off these garments, because they would make her powerful, could possibly defeat her sister and take control of the underworld.
Sekhmet and Ishtar.
It's basically the equivalent of Sekhmet and Ishtar, Inanna and her sister, the Merkabah. And same, they show up in various cultures. What was particularly interesting about that is also what happens in the myth of Inanna. That she had a friend or a sister on the surface, I can't remember which, who sent these two flies down to search out for her, to find her. She was able to somehow use these flies to search out and seek for people and see through their eyes. And so you have what we would call nowadays a insect-like remote control vehicle, which you can use to do surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the Zaria hornet that shows up in Joshua, that were used to seek out and find the giants and drive them out. So you have this repeating technology being shown again and again in various myths. This also shows up in the myth of what is it called?
It indicates that Ishtar and Anna had access to technology, use
Correct.
of technology. And I mean, you see her associated with the sphere with wings as well. I've looked into that sphere with wings, and I think it might depict a flying device. And if you look at the
maybe
the legend of out of Gilgamesh, when he ruled in Uruk, I mean, Ishtar and Anna asked him to go up and fly the skies of Earth with her.
Mm-hmm.
So little things like that points back to I think this entity having this type of technology.
This old stories, including the biblical ones I'm finding, are encoding lots of interesting information about possibly technology. Gilgamesh's travels, his encounters with various things and people, searching for the plant of immortality in reference to the tree of life. He goes down into Eden too, actually, and finds not a garden of trees, but a garden of stones. This is one of the reasons I like the idea of the trees of the Garden of Eden as being these stones on top of these iron poles. The rod of iron mentioned in the book of Revelation shows up in Elijah's story as well. And also Moses actually has the rod of Jethro.
Yeah.
And the Eden of Gilgamesh, all of the trees are made up of precious stones, not of leaves. And so we have a situation where in the stones of fire in Ezekiel, was it 32 or 28? I forget which. I keep reading that one. The stones of fire, probably referring to the same precious stones.
Ezekiel 28.
28, yeah. The stones of fire in Eden, probably the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so two of the three references of Eden, either in the Bible or ancient Near Eastern texts, both refer to Eden as being filled with trees that are made of stones, precious stones. So we can assume, based on that, including especially since the Bible is one of them, that it's fair to say that the trees of Eden were not organic ones, but made of precious stone.
This would be like columns of crystals or some sort of a sacred crystal.
The book of Jasher says there mentions a sapphire staff. It was in Eden that Moses used to gain knowledge from, Adam and Eve did. And I suspect it wasn't a sapphire staff, it was a sapphire on a staff. It was a mistranslation. The actual staff was the iron rod. And when the Zohar stone was not in use on the head, they would place it on the staff for safekeeping. And it would sit there, as the staff was also a recharging device. And it would sit there for most of the time. But if they wanted to learn something quickly, what they would do is they would put the crown on their head and they could download anything they wanted into their brains. This is what happened with Moses on Mount Sinai. God used the Zohar stone to teach him everything in 40 days. And so this is why when Moses comes down from the mountain, he's said to have horns on his head. And it's like, Moses, why do you have these horns on your head? And he had to cover that because, it looks weird. But I'll show you an image of what the Zohar looks like here. Here's an image of Hathor. So Moses was basically wearing this on his head. You can see this. Oops. That's my cat, sorry. So this is the image of Hathor.
Yeah.
As you can see, she's a goddess wearing this red disc on her head. That's the Eye of Ra.
Yeah, it's
And
Isis.
so Moses is wearing the same. That's actually Isis too did that.
Yeah.
It's actual pictures as of Hathor.
Right.
But it's basically the same goddess. Hathor was a goddess kind of Sinai and also had a major temple in Egypt as well.
So
She was the most ancient one.
So what is that though? It's
that
for
is
people listening. It's like it's as if you had they were wearing a ball on their head with horns.
It is let me look this up since we're talking about it. It is an elliptical lens-shaped giant sapphire stone.
Yeah.
The red color comes from the lasers that are used to read right to it from the horns on the other side. It was a spinning disc like a classic optical hard drive made of sapphire. Sapphire stones are actually crystals, and you can actually read and write data to and from discs made of sapphire.
That's incredible.
Any kind of crystal.
That's incredible.
You can see and the Ark of the Covenant stones were the same way. They were also made of sapphires. That's what the rabbis say. This is why the word for book and the word for sapphire in Hebrew are almost identical. The word book is sefer, and the word for sapphire is sapphire. Same three letters, except there's the addition after the pay and the resh. In between the pay and the resh, there is a yod, which means that this is a book that is a hand. Yod means hand in Hebrew. So Samek is the circle of the Zohar stone. Pei means face, is in speaking to God face to face. Resh means head. This is the head you wear it on your head. And the Yod means it acts as a hand. You can manipulate the world using the lasers or fingers of God to manipulate reality as you know it. In fact, if this thing is what I think it is, it can actually create anything out of anything. If it actually penetrate and manipulate atoms down at the atomic or subatomic level, if it could add or remove one or more protons from the nucleus of the atom, it can turn any element into any other element, such as lead into gold. This might also be what we call the Philosopher's Stone, on top of everything else. And so you can see I'm so excited about understanding what this is.
Yeah.
This is core knowledge.
Yeah.
This is it. If this is what I think it is, it literally answers all the questions of the Old Testament, and a lot more we don't even know about.
I mean, and I always had the deep sense that these strange objects in these depictions of the ancients had something to do with technology. The handbags. And I'm glad you broke that down, though, with this headdress thing with sapphire, because I've always wondered what that was. But I've always had the notion that it was for or being used as technology.
It would have to be.
Yeah.
What else would it be? There's no such thing as magic. All that magic is technology we don't understand. In order to do things in the physical realm, you have to be able to manipulate matter at some level. And it would require technology to do that, because you're basically causing something to pass energy into another object to manipulate it, whether it be a stick or electricity or ray of light in the case of the Zohar. It has to be some kind of transmission of energy, and that's what technology can do.
So when it comes to Isis, Hathor, Ishtar, Sekhmet, what do you think that represents? Are those, because they don't seem to be fallen angels, maybe they are, or are they some other type of pre-Adamic entity? Are they part of the Elohim, or what do you think they are?
All so-called gods and goddesses are descendants of the Nephilim. They were giants, or partly giant ancestry, who had been given technology by their ancestors, such as the Zohar, to give them godlike powers to rule over humanity, the normal Homo sapiens humanity that God created and intended to use. The giants were intended to lord over humanity and through them conquer and control the world. And the technology helped them do that. And the Zohar was the greatest of all these technologies.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I'm like still thinking about these stones, the power of these stones. You're talking about sapphire, and this is just something I'll sprinkle in here that I think it's interesting. Going back to that CIA document I was talking about earlier, where they remote viewed Jupiter, the remote viewers were talking about the surface of Jupiter being like a beach, like sands on a beach, but instead of them being grains of sand, they were rocks, crystals. They look like sapphire, I think, if I'm remembering that
Where
correctly,
was that again?
on the surface of Jupiter in a
Yeah,
CIA document. And they said
understood.
it looked like if you were to stand on the, you would kind of sink down in there. So it was like a field of crystals. And then they said there were mountains in the background that were like 3 or 4 times bigger than any mountain ranges here on Earth. And I don't know, I just thought that was interesting that they said it was like colored like sapphire. But
Interesting.
the Jasher thing, what do you think about the notion that knowledge could be stored in crystal or in rock,
It can
almost
be.
like a computer?
You can store data to a spinning disk that is crystal in nature because it has a regular pattern of
Mm,
crystal. You can write to it and address it. It has to be transparent though, and so really all sapphire has occlusions in it, which make that impossible. But if you can create artificial sapphire, which you could, I mean, it's just basically compressed aluminum oxide. You can write to that disk and read to it and write from it, or write to it and read from it, and put gigantic amounts of knowledge in it because the sapphire is not just this one layer; it's like maybe millions. So with a CD-ROM, which interestingly is also a disk covered with aluminum oxide, same material as sapphire, you get one layer, which is like maybe up to 1 gigabyte or something. But with thousands or millions of layers, you can get terabytes, petabytes, maybe higher than that. And this is why the sapphire stone. Now here's its hieroglyph of Ra here. Show it to you. This actually shows the Zohar stone, how it's constructed.
okay.
Um, let's see if I can see it there.
There we go.
This is the god. This is the god Ra. It means the god symbol. This is how he actually looks. This is how he looks from the front. This is how he looks from the side, and this is how large he is. So this determinative here underneath the horse falcon indicates this is a real physical object. This is how Ra actually looks. He's not like a man. He's actually this round thing. This, you can leave the serpent out. That's symbolic. So Ra looks like this round disc, just like you saw on top of the head of Hathor. This is how he looks from the side. He's so a lens-shaped disc. And this is how big he is. That's a symbol for one, what's it called? 1 cubit, which is about 20 inches across. That's the symbol. 1 cubit is the measure of the arm from the fingertips to the elbow. And so this means Ra is a round object that's elliptical, lens-shaped, and it's 1 cubit in diameter. Basically,
Like a
exactly what you see
UFO.
no, it's 20 inches only. And so that's what you saw on the head of Hathor.
Oh, okay.
It's a
Okay.
physical object, so it's not round. It's a lens shape,
Sure.
just like a hard drive. It would be
Just
just
like a
like
hard drive. I see.
it's an optical hard drive,
Mm.
and they can read and write to that disk. It's on their head spinning and reading and writing data. Probably there's lasers in the horns in the side, maybe a lot of them to allow for more disk access. And you could write to it doing that. And if you think about, well, it sounds really complicated. We figured that out in a few decades. And if you have the fallen angels helping you figure this out, or God himself has created it, which we did with Moses, when he created the 2 tablets of the Ark of the Covenant, which are exactly the same technology, I believe. He didn't have to inscribe them with a hammer and chisel. He just put them in the CD-ROM burner and burned a new pair.
That's perfect because I was getting ready to ask you about tablets
Yeah.
anyway. Yeah.
The tablets are actually optical hard drives. That means they use a laser to read and write. That's basically what a CD-ROM drive is. But this is actually a transparent sapphire. You can actually write inside the disk. How I came to this conclusion was when I actually looked at the idea of what the rabbis were saying about the tablets. They didn't say they were made of granite; that they're made of sapphire. I was like, well, that's interesting. Why sapphire? And they weren't that large. They were actually kind of small. And moreover, they said the word that says the word of God was written not on the outside but on the inside. And so it was written from one side to the other, as if it was like the word is used to travel across a river. Instead of going to a bridge and going around, that'd be kind of equivalent to going riding on the outside. They actually went across the river from one side to the other. And the only way you could ride inside of a sapphire would be a laser. Therefore, due to the laws of physics, it would have to be an optical hard drive with a laser because it's the only way you could do that. The rabbis tried to figure it out because they didn't understand technology. They figured, well, you actually just drilled holes through the thing and wrote it that way. But the problem was with the Samic question they had, which is ironic because the Samic is a symbol that Zohar also being encircled. They said the Samic was a round circle. There was no break, and so you couldn't drill it a Samic because it would just cause the whole piece to fall through. So they said it was magically held in place. But you understand the concept they're trying to communicate, as they understand absolutely that information was inside the stone and went from one side to the other. It's very clear from the text. And so we now, from understanding the technology, a la Daniel 12, then we now get it, that the technology was involved. This Zohar stone was actually, must have been an optical hard drive using lasers. There's literally no other way for this to work outside of magic.
Yeah.
And one other thing I want to mention, Daniel 12 is interesting also because the word Zohar shows up in Daniel 12. And it's translated as brilliance, and it has to do with people figuring out the secrets in the end times. They'll shine bright like the stars. And so you see, I'm reading about the very thing that I'm learning about in the text as I'm learning about it. I figured it out. Daniel was talking about the Zohar stuff. And he said, we figured out in the end times, someone would find it maybe, and we'd learn about the ancient mysteries by reading, by either using the concept to decipher some of the stuff in the Old Testament, or actually finding one of the Zohar stones, switching the thing on, and accessing it directly like a computer. That might actually happen. In fact, the Antichrist might actually find the Zohar and use it to help him conquer the world. He'll get the entire kit, the ketnet, the staff, the belt, the necklace, everything. The Antichrist, in my opinion, and his forces have been traveling all across the world, Indiana Jones style, finding all these artifacts so they can reassemble them and make the Antichrist effectively all-powerful, all-knowing, and invincible.
And you see, or I've seen legends of these tablets almost as if they're being passed down, like groups of people are trying to hold on to this knowledge for some reason. I see it with the legend of Tubal-Cain, Nama. They caught wind that the deluge was coming, and they stored these tablets beneath, I think, the Great Pyramid, somewhere in Egypt. And then I also found mention of Mount Ararat, the Mount Ararat tablets, where Shem or Ham, after the flood, went there to get tablets that were stored under that mountain. Now, Paracelsus, yeah, and it was Ararat. Paracelsus talked about it. So you've got like the line of Cain trying to preserve their tablets, and then you've got Noah and his sons trying to preserve tablets as well.
That's right. One made of stone, one made of clay, something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Something like
I'd have
that.
to look it up, but yeah, it's just interesting. It's like there's more to these tablets.
There are physical tablets too, which record things too, but these are actually technology tablets. Which, for example, if you read about the Zohar, look it up online. There's some interesting references. I'll send them to you. There's also reference to the Zohar that Solomon would gaze into it and learn things from it. And he actually created these great lights that would light up Jerusalem at night that weren't powered by any known method. It wasn't fire. And these great spheres, which are how they worked, was no one idea. Probably it was wireless electricity, which Solomon learned how to do that from the Zohar stone, which has, as a computer, all knowledge in it. It wasn't like the tree of knowledge after all. And so he read into it, learned all the knowledge he wanted to know, and applied it in a peaceful way. King David wanted to use it for war. I think I mentioned earlier that the Zohar stone could also be used for warlike capability. Its ability to project powerful lasers makes it an extremely effective weapon. The lasers that read and write to the disk can also be projected outwards, massively amplified and projected outwards. Very powerful weapon, laser weapons. And for example, one time it said, one of the rabbinic traditions said that the Ark of the Covenant used to fly out. I mentioned the Ark of the Covenant because it uses the same technology. The Ark of the Covenant used to fly out and zap before the host of Israel, and fire would come out of it in front of it in the form of what looked like a thin red thread. It would burn up all the snakes and scorpions and thorn bushes so Israel could pass over. No problems. Thin red thread that causes fires could only be a laser. Regular fire wouldn't go that far. That wouldn't be a thin red thread. And so the technological necessities of what the Zohar and the Ark could do, store data, for example, and send out rays of fire to burn things, could only be described as a laser. It also explains what the finger of God was. It was supposed to be some kind of a ray of light. That's what a laser is. Laser is basically directed light that's passed through a crystal. The crystal, for example, a ruby is the first laser we used to create a laser. What it does is almost all of the photons that are not going in a particular direction are reflected away. And so all that's left is a directed stream of photons. And so that's because it's like polarized lenses. Only the photons that are coming directly toward you are allowed through. The rest are scattered. So a lot of the blurry stuff is just dispersed. And so that's basically how that works and why the technology works the way it does.
Wow. Yeah. It's been a while since I've read through some of those earlier books of the Old Testament, but I seem to remember too when the Israelites were out there, they talked about a column of clouds, and they also talked about a fire. Like
the Shekinah.
Yeah.
In front of I believe the Zohar actually stood in front of the gates of the Holy of Holies, guarding it.
Mm.
It was also the guardian of the gates of Eden, where it was called the sword that turned all ways. The only way you could do that is if you have, for example, the way you saw the way that the Eye of Ra was constructed. It's basically a U-shaped pair of horns. And what you could do was, if the Zohar was able to twist the turn in between that, you could do a 180 degree vertical turn, and the horns could probably turn horizontally too. So it could actually look in all directions, up, down, side to side. If it could project a laser, the ability to do 180 or 360 degrees vertical or horizontal means it could be a sword that could turn all ways.
Mm-hmm.
That laser could point in any direction and hit anything. Also, I think this explains the mystery of Excalibur and the sword and the stone. Excalibur was this mystical sword which was very powerful. Something like the Clem Chalet or the Sword of Light of King Noada of the Tuatha De Danann, but that's another story. That might have been like a laser like this too. But the Excalibur...
Those are the entities from the Irish folklore?
Yeah, Tuatha De Danann were technologically advanced people that actually flew to Ireland in airships, probably Zeppelins. But I think the Sword of Light or the Excalibur might have been the same sword. And it wasn't a sword, it was the Zohar or a similar device. I think that because I think what happens was the magic sword concept and the sword of the stone concept got confused and separated. When you pull the sword out of the stone, you're not pulling a physical sword out of a physical stone. What you're doing is you're learning how to make the laser sword project out of the Zohar stone and act as a sword and cut up your enemies, because the Zohar, like the Ark of the Covenant's weapons, could probably slice and dice an entire army in a matter of seconds. That's probably what it did. And what the Excalibur was, as the king will come sometime in the future who has knowledge of how to cause the sword to come out of the stone. In other words, he shows how to turn on the computer and turn it on attack mode and make the laser come out. So the sword is brought out of the stone, not out of a physical stone. It's projected as a laser out of this computer-like device.
Incredible.
It answers.
I mean, it just makes me wonder how many of these ancient sites hold some sort of an ancient technology within the rocks themselves. Naga Iglesia, I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's a cave up in Peru, and there's a big stone there, and it looks like the interface of like a spaceship. Just the carvings in it and everything. It's
Wow.
like what is this for? There's and we could go on and on with these archaeological finds that seem it's like they look like there's a technology associated with them. Once you know what, or once you've heard a conversation like the one we've had today, you can see the association, I think. And before we wrap this up, this has been great. I do want to ask you, what do you think about the Star of Bethlehem and that sort of figment or whatever that was in the night sky?
Star Bethlehem was probably the last appearance of Planet X. Planet X has in my opinion, 2,000-year orbit, which rings around every 2,000 years. Last time it appeared as the Star of Bethlehem. The time before that it appeared before the birth of Abraham. Birth of Abraham, I think in the book of Jasher, was preceded by the appearance of a star or stars that kind of came out of the west or something and devoured 3 other stars or something like that. And so he was preceded by a large star also. And 2,000 years before that, you have the Sumerians who worship the star. Very similar concept of this god who was a star coming out of nowhere. The core concept behind Marduk, who replaced Anu and Enlil in the mythologies of the Mesopotamians. Both of them were perceived to be the star in the heavens, which appeared occasionally and caused, great feats to be done. It was the core concept of the Day of the Lord is that Planet X comes back every once in a while, and pelts the Earth with asteroids, thereby judging it. This judgment happens every once in a while. So this Day of the Lord is actually about 2,000 years, or happens about every 2,000 years when Planet X returns, and asteroids hit the Earth more frequently than otherwise. It also is the concept of a Day of the Lord, where it says the Day of the Lord is 1,000 days, and 1,000 days is one day, or something like that. I think what they meant was 1,000 plus 1,000 means 2,000. One day of the Lord where Planet X is approaching the sun, and one night when it's going away, total of 2,000 years. In Hebrew, the day was divided into day and night. It wasn't a day and night. One day was light, one half of the day was light, and the other half of the day was dark. And so one day has to encompass light and darkness. And so that's the concept probably comes from the orbit of Planet X, and it spends much of its orbit outside the solar system in the darkness of space. And another thing, I had no idea which slipped my mind. Basically, the orbit of Planet X, that's right, it has to do with the day-age theory. We're taking the idea of day based on the solar day, but we should probably take that basic concept of day as the Planet X orbital period of 2,000 years. And that would explain how God could come down, lay out all kinds of plants, plant them everywhere, and go away for a while. If it was one literal day, they wouldn't have the chance to germinate. But if it was 2,000 years, that's plenty of time to spread. In fact, if you plant plants strategically around the Earth, you could probably fill the whole Earth in 2,000 years, depending on how quickly they propagate. Plants will go pretty quickly, as you probably know. Once they start going, they really start going, particularly when there's no animals to eat them. And so 2,000-year orbit of Planet X probably is the day which is used as the measure for the Genesis day of creation. Each of these days, God would go away for a while, come back 2,000 years later, inspect his creation, and add new element to it. Then the plants, another 2,000 year comes back. He gets the animals, gives them 2,000 years to propagate. Then another 2,000 years after that, he creates mankind. And the animals are ready for them to categorize, classify, cook, and eat, and as well as the plants. But without that time to propagate, there's no way they would have any food to eat.
Wow, there's so much tied into this Planet X. I mean, even it seems like these 3 wise men knew something about this. What do you think they were? Are they like astronomer alchemists who knew that it signified the coming of an infinite king?
Probably the Magi are probably what we call Freemasonic type folks who kept ancient traditions and knowledge that was of secret nature.
Zoroastrian, perhaps?
So the Magi are actually a caste of astrologer priests who lived in Persia. They were actually part of that culture. When we studied ancient Persia, we found there was a group of priests, a priestly caste, or a group of people like the Levites who were dedicated to priestly knowledge called the Magi. And so it's absolutely certain the Magi came from Persia and not from three different parts of the earth. You know, some may have visited from other parts of the earth. Magi, for example, Balaam was probably a Magi type figure. I think he was called a Magus, actually. And so the Magi were these learned men, philosopher, priests, scholars, magicians, but they were really intellectuals. They corresponded most closely to the intellectual caste of ancient Persia. They were the academics who studied all kinds of things, including magic, which is what we understand as technology, which at that time was kind of interpenetrated with the knowledge of demons and the names of demons, casting spells, invoking demons to help them gain knowledge, which may have actually been true because even the Book of Enoch says that the fallen angels gave mankind knowledge of the arts and sciences. And the Bible kind of alludes to that too.
Yeah, Azazel, who we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
Azazel.
Azion, Azazel,
Mm-hmm.
Semyaza, and Semyaza.
Yeah.
I consider the possibility that Satan is not either Azazel or Semyaza, but a combination of both working together. And so that's why he doesn't have a name.
That's interesting.
Just if you look at one of the, this will blow your mind too. If you look at, I think it's one of the paintings of Satan as this goat demon. If you turn it upside down, you see this Yoda-like face. I think the Yoda-like face is actually supposed to be Semyaza, his sort of wife. Semyaza is actually Satan's kind of wife.
Do you know, how would I find that painting? That's interesting.
I forget the name of it. It's a Baphomet painting by.
Is it by Eliphas Livy?
I think it might have been by him.
Yeah.
There's one that has like a torch on top, and there's another which has this face on the top of the head.
That's it. Well, either way, that's
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's hard to pinpoint who Satan actually is, and
That's true.
I'm open-minded to it being a number of entities, or maybe it's one entity that goes by many different names. I'm not sure yet.
I'm thinking it's Azazel and Semyaza combined together into a kind of an infernal marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That explains why there's this head, upside down head on top of Azazel, and also Azazel and Semyaza seem to be paired in the Book of Enoch. Both Azazel and Semyaza are kind of punished by the archangels. Azazel is buried under these jagged rocks in the desert of Dudael.
By Raphael, maybe?
Probably Raphael, yeah, I forget which one. But Semyaza is hung upside down between heaven and earth. And we probably don't have time to talk about that. I think there's Semyaza might actually be that Zohar's done too.
Wow. That's I also wonder too, I know we don't have time for this either, but I wonder if there's a female counterpart, like an androgynous element to these entities where maybe Lilith is a part of this satanic force field as well. Lilith or Inanna even.
Semyaza and Lilith are probably the same being. This androgynous bisexual being.
There we go.
Whereas Azazel is a very strongly male being. That's my conclusion.
Okay. I've kind of come to that conclusion as well, as far as Semyaza and Lilith go.
They're very similar. They have some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
They have similar roles. Azazel or Semyaza is more of a group thinker of the collaborate with other fallen angels, whereas Azazel is this lone wolf character, never mentioned with any other demons. Even though he probably just creates robot servants, that's probably what the gray aliens are, and all the reptoids and the mantis people. They're probably all bio robots. The gray aliens are apparently they're
I think so.
Biological and technological combined. They're true, very efficient cyborgs.
Biological robot constructed army.
They abduct humans so they can take their DNA and refresh their bodies because they need to be cloned occasionally. And the cloning process wears down and they degenerate and they have to get new fresh DNA, and that's where they bring people up to steal from them.
Yeah, I've come to that conclusion as well. Are you saying that maybe that's the handiwork of Azazel?
Azazel is probably doing Azazel's and his demons are up in the atmosphere, and Semyaza and her demons are in hell.
In
They're
the earth.
in the earth, and Azazel is above the earth.
Yeah.
And that's why you have this heaven earth thing where they're trying to come together to work together. Heaven earth combined, the Hierophant, the evil priest, the shaman is trying to combine those two into one. That's what they want to do. Ultimately, like Sauron and the Ring, Azazel.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's
Put
just
them
like Lord of the
together.
Rings, where you have the dwarfs race or whatever that is. There's like an evil race that comes out from the earth, and that's
There was an evil dwarf in Sumerian, yeah.
yeah.
The
But
evil race is the orcs.
the orcs, yeah, they seem to come out of the earth in that
They are
movie.
earth-like, as are the
Yeah.
troll. They're made out of
So,
rocks.
and isn't it interesting that you see in a lot of those legends sprinkled across antiquity, uh, and even into modern times with the Cherokee, you have the legends of the inner Earth people. And even now today, this is a big old cauldron that you have to sift through, but of truth and not truth. But these Nazca mummies, so-called Nazca mummies, some of them seem to be possibly legit. I've talked to some researchers on this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pulling them out of mines. They're like little. They remind me of the Cherokee little people, these little goblins that live in the earth. They might not be coming from the atmosphere, from another dimension. They might be coming from inner earth. I know that's a big old can of worms there, but I think there's something to what we're saying here. You've got entities from above, entities from below.
Right. I'm thinking. That's what I'm theorizing.
Yeah.
Why you have these beings up in the atmosphere, but also underneath the earth. Perhaps they're Azazel and Semyaz's different groups that they work with, kind of like the heat miser and the cold miser.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this Inanna Ishtar character was involved with some of these constructed armies as well.
She has her own. She's very wise also. Azazel seems to be dominant, but Semyaz is so powerful that she kind of can resist him. Some of the angels, fallen angels in Enoch, is talking about one type of demon creates things, another one undoes them. They kind of balance each other. There's two different types of demons that can undo each other's work. There's like, I forget exactly what it was. It's something that creates and something that destroys. And so they're kind of in opposition to each other.
They seem to be. I wonder too, like if some of the stuff we're reading in Revelation is actually describing a power struggle between these entities, between Semyaza,
Yeah.
Azael, and Inanna Ishtar, because she is also known as Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's you're having in the first half of the tribulation, Azazel is conquering and taking control of Semyaza and her forces, or subduing them. It's basically the Western Hemisphere conquering the Eastern Hemisphere. Azazel's philosophy is capitalism, basically, and technology, and Semyaza's is communism and like collective thinking.
oh my
And
God, I didn't know that. Oh, this goes so deep.
the
Wow.
Western Eastern Hemisphere. The reason I like that is because these two cosmic creator demons control each hemisphere. Ever since the time of the Persians and the Spartans fighting each other, it's been that way. Spartans were the Western Azazel people, and the Persians were the Semyaza people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think.
Yeah. So yeah, if Azael is still locked in the desert, he's running things from behind the scenes like a mob boss in prison.
I suspect that when Flinders Petrie went down there and opened up the flagstones to Cerebit, the Hathor temple there, he may have let Azazel out.
Who's this? Who went there?
Sir William Flinders Petrie was a famous British archaeologist who mapped out and documented the Hathor temple in Cerebit al-Qadim as a possible candidate for Mount Sinai. And he found when he went to the Hathor temple there, which is just northeast of there, Hathor has an appearance can be either a woman with cow ears or a golden cow, and so is her son, Apis, and so the golden calf was probably Apis or Hathor. And since there's a Hathor temple just north of Zerbet al-Qadim, it's almost certain that Zerbet al-Qadim is the actual Mount Sinai, because it would make perfect sense for them to worship a golden calf, because that's what other people who went to that sanctuary did. That's why one of the
give me that archaeologist's name one more time. I'm sorry.
William Flinders,
William Flint. Now,
Finders, Petrie, Petrie.
okay. I'm wondering if he's the same guy I was reading about a while back who was going into Ethiopia as well. And
Must
look,
have-
but anyways, yeah,
He
this
went all over
is
the place, but when he
yeah.
found that what he looked like underneath the flagstones of the temple there, of the Hathor temple, it looked like a huge amount of white wood ash, like it was very fine powder. He thought it was like burnt up powder, but why would you put that on the flagstones? What Lawrence Gardner determined, he believes it was actually a huge amount of monatomic gold. And it's possible that the desert of Dudael literally means the breasts of God. So the god of the mountain of Mount Sinai was called what was his name? El Shaddai. Shaddai means God of the breasts also. And the twin mountains of Serpent al-Qadim were compared with the breasts of the goddess Hathor. And so one of the reasons I think Azazel is maybe buried underneath or nearby Serpent al-Qadim is because of that association with the breasts concept, the twin-peaked mountain. So the jagged mountain twin peak god might have been an asteroid that was actually thrown down and used to bury him. And he's buried underneath those rocks or somewhere nearby. And that monatomic gold at the Hathor temple was there to keep him down somehow.
You know, it's interesting. The desert of Dudael, I'm pretty sure there's a big old hole in the ground there, a pit, a well of hell, I think is what they call it.
Yes. It's an entrance to the underworld, same place I was talking about earlier. Just north of the mountain, there's a large opening which corresponds to that.
Yeah. You know, this is crazy because I remember when I looked into this place, for some reason, I was like, I wonder if this has something to do with Azael and where he was chained or captive.
Probably was chained down there. I say he was released because not long after Petrie came there and opened up the flagstones, there came this demon out of the wilderness named Iwas and visited just like less than a year later, and visited a young man living in Egypt at the time in Cairo named Aleister Crowley.
Crowley, yeah.
And from there came every evil of the 20th century.
Oh, you're dropping bombs.
He got Azazel possessed him.
Yeah, and you see, well, I don't have time to go into all of this today, but the influence of Iwas on Crowley links up with the 1947 UFO movement and the kickoff to that.
Right. Things started rolling into place, and that's why I like the idea of Azazel and the fallen angel gray aliens, is because all the gray stuff started happening during that century. So he opened a key, like the angel with the key to the bottomless pit. It might be the bottomless pit was opened back in early 20th century, or the beginning of it was.
Do you think that William Flinders went in there and actually may have loosed this thing?
He might have been sent there for that purpose.
Oh, Ben, I'm gonna look.
William Flinders Petrie, excavations in Sinai or researchers in Sinai. There's also.
Well, he was okay. I'm just looking at what time his where he was alive, and he died in 1942 in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. He mostly lived in the early 20th century and late 19th. Very famous British archaeologist.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Now that I'm seeing that Petrie, I remember that name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, man, wow, that is. You're connecting some dots. I really did not expect for you to bring Iwas up. That's interesting.
I can bring a lot of things.
Oh, I know. I yes.
Really are just scratching the surface.
Well, you know, Crowley goes on to create Thelema.
Right.
Thelema is based on the goddess Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the earliest forms of the goddess Babylon, it's Ishtar and Anna.
How does that connect to Star Trek, do you wonder?
I don't know. You tell me.
Lucy Lucy Arnaz was married to Desi Arnaz. Lucy, I suspect, both of them worshipped Babalu or Babylon. And whenever Lucy on the Lucy Show, whenever he played his music, she would say to him, "Oh, Ricky, Babalu."
Wow.
And how does that connect to Star Trek, you ask?
Yes.
Star Trek was made by Desilu Studios, which means Desi and Lucy. Desi Arnaz and Lucy Arnaz created Star Trek, in which there was a large amount of occult material masquerading as science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
They taught people how to think like Gnostics by using Star Trek to do so,
Mm-hmm.
and began their part of the Babylon working in the creation of a Babylonian culture, using Star Trek and similar shows as the means to do so.
No wonder Gene Roddenberry was brought in.
Gene Roddenberry.
Mm-hmm.
Your Gene Roddenberry link, the Archons, all the other things.
Yeah.
No
and
accident.
I mean, even like comic books. I have a huge comic book collection. I was really into that when I was younger. And when you start looking into Marvel and some of the influences of it was Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, were two of the big guys over at Marvel.
Right.
They were drawing influence from Howard Hughes and the real life adventures of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes was looking at portals and portal locations. We talked about that earlier. Places, natural locations here on the earth, usually on mountains, where there's said to be entrances into essentially like another dimension or the underworld. Hughes was very interested in those portals. And it's said that he was actually there's a mountain over there in Spain in the Pyrenees Mountains. It's called Mount Contigu. And apparently Hughes had a base set up at the bottom of Mount Contigu where he had compiled this sort of motley crew of CIA, actually Nazi scientists and like soothsayers, psychics, put them all in this underground base down there, and they were working with portals. They were trying to figure out how they could use portals, where they could go, all this and that. Somehow, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee knew about this, and they were using this in the comic books.
Yeah.
In the storyline, they were incorporating like what you're saying, like incorporating like incognito occult ideas all throughout the whole.
The radio, TV, film, books, comic books were all quietly injecting occult concepts into the culture.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, and once you start to see it, it's undeniable. And I even heard a story the other day. This is this guy's story. I'm not going to like try to retell it, but it's a director of MUFON. I heard him in an interview talking about how his mom worked for Howard Hughes, and it was another underground situation. It was out in the American desert. They had an underground base down there that was almost like a city underground. Like you could get your hair cut, you could get coffee and sandwiches and all kinds of stuff. You could live down there for a time if need be. And it was in conjunction with our government, of course, and our military. Hughes was doing this in conjunction with the military. She worked there because she was trustworthy. She had worked for some sort of for some sort of military thing before. So Howard Hughes was like, "Oh, I can trust you." He brought her in. She tells her son, goes on to become the director of MUFON, but she tells him because she doesn't think he's going to remember because he was very young. But he remembered, and so they had this sort of like unspoken thing about this base. Like she knew, he knew, blah blah blah. But anyway, he takes her to go see Star Wars, and as they're walking out of the movie, she says, "Oh, all of that's real. This is the type of stuff we were dealing with when I worked with Hughes."
Wow.
I mean, it's just a story, but like it just once you learn and some of the stuff that we've talked about today, it seems possible.
Yeah, if man can imagine it, he can create it. When Solomon said there's nothing new under the sun, everything that's being created now has existed in the past. And I talked about earlier how the Zohar was translated as noonday sun in Genesis 6:16. Not because it was the noonday sun, because it's shown like the noonday sun. It's described consistently throughout Scripture, translated as a shining sun-like object. But it wasn't the sun. It was a small, relatively smaller object that shone like the sun. So what Solomon is telling us when he says there's nothing new under the sun, he's saying he learned this from the Zohar stone, which shines like the sun. So he's saying to you where I got this knowledge from, hidden in plain sight. You have to understand what he's talking about, though, otherwise you don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Incredible. This has been an incredible episode. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and your research with us.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this has been great. This is a good place to wrap it up, I think. Tell everybody where they can find you and any projects you want them to know about.
You can find me online at, and let's see, I have this website at mysterioussworld.com. You can go to planet-x.info. That's planet-x.info to find a link to my Planet X book. You can look me up on Facebook. I think it's facebook.com/Doug Elwell. Let me check it real quick. Or you can just look me up, Doug Elwell, and friend me there. I also run some Substack blogs, one called Stratagem, another one called AHA News, which is about real estate, which is totally different. I'm going to start doing different blogs from Mysterious World and stuff in the future. So look me up on Stratagem and subscribe to my blogs, and I'll let you know when the new blogs about Mysterious World and X come out.
Awesome. All right. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.